Okay, let's jump right into this. We've got some really fascinating source material today.
We do. It takes a saying, one most of us think we know pretty well.
And completely flips it. Almost cosmically flips it on its head.
Right. We're doing a deep dive into a familiar phrase to uncover something, well, pretty unexpected.
The phrase in Korean is aoju, oju, ojuo.
Oju, oju, iju.
And in English, you'll definitely know it. It does not matter how slowly you go as long as you do not stop.
Yeah, and usually you hear that, and it's just straightforward motivation, isn't it?
Totally. It's about persistence, grit, patience.
Yep.
It kind of assumes time is just this straight line.
And speed is the measure of success.
Exactly. And stopping. Stopping is basically framed as, well, failing.
Right. It fits that neat linear picture of progress. Always forward. But the mission here, for you listening, based on these sources,
Is to look way past that surface meaning.
yeah, we're going to try and dissolve some of those standard ideas and explore a completely different pattern of progress this text reveals. Maybe even a bit mind-bending.
Definitely sounds like it. So how does this source material even start to chip away at that core idea? The need for speed, the never stopping part.
Well, it begins by really questioning those basic assumptions we just laid out. Like, is time really always linear in the way we experience it or measure it? And is speed truly the only or best measure of success? The source kind of points out that the saying often implies this single path.
Right. Like you're on a racetrack.
Exactly. But then it asks, what if we're not? What if we're more like, and this is a quote from the source, nonlinear beings in a multidimensional process?
Okay, nonlinear beings in a multidimensional process.
That's
That's a big shift right there. It's not just about speed on the path.
It's questioning the path itself,
Huh.
or the idea of a single path.
Got it.
And it digs in with more questions, like, is slow even a meaningful concept if you're not comparing it to something else?
Right. Slow compared to what?
And could stillness, what looks like stopping, actually be, a different kind of movement, one we just don't recognize? Plus, is never stopping always the best thing? Could pausing, taking a moment of stillness, actually be catalytic, like it sparks something?
So these questions really force you to move beyond that simple keep pushing mantra.
They really do. They make you sort of stop and think about the thinking.
Okay, so after breaking down those conventional notions, where does the source go? How does it start building this alternative picture?
This is where it gets really cool, I think. It starts connecting ideas from wildly different fields. The source talks about finding patterns across domains, like building neural cross connections and how we understand progress.
Okay, like the first one mentions quantum physics. That seems like a huge leap.
Yeah.
How does particle behavior connect to going slow?
I know, it sounds pretty out there, but the source uses it this way. Subatomic particles, they don't really move fast or slow like we think of a car moving.
Right, they're more about probabilities.
Exactly. They exist in these states of probability until they're observed. So the insight the source draws is maybe our own progress isn't always linear forward motion either. Maybe it's more probabilistic, like an unfolding of potential rather than just covering ground.
Wow, okay. That definitely reframes things. What about something more grounded, like nature? The source talks about trees.
Ah, yes, trees. Think about how they grow. It's incredibly slow. Day to day, you barely see it.
Imperceptible almost.
Right. But over time, that slow, steady, consistent growth, it creates entire forests, massive ecosystems, things that last for ages.
So the slowness isn't weakness, it's
Accumulative power. That's the term the source uses. It's about building depth, scale, resilience through sheer endurance over long time scales, not through bursts of speed.
okay, I see that.
Oh.
And then music. How does that fit in? Seems like a totally different realm again.
But think about rests in music, those moments of silence. The source points out they aren't just gaps.
No, they're crucial.
Absolutely crucial for rhythm, for structure. A rest isn't an absence. The source calls it structural tension. It shapes the sounds around it, gives notes their impact, drives the feeling forward.
So applied to progress, a pause isn't a failure. It's part of the rhythm.
Exactly. An integral, necessary part of the whole unfolding process. Not a stop, but a beat within the rhythm.
Okay, I'm starting to feel the rhythm of this argument. What about inside our own heads? Neuroscience, neuroplasticity.
Yeah, neuroplasticity. It's a great example because it's not like flicking a switch and your brain is instantly rewired.
No, it takes time, repetition.
Right. It's about consistent rewiring, happening gradually. tiny signals firing along pathways over and over again. The source actually frames that those microsignals consistently firing as the non-stopping.
So non-stopping might not mean constant visible action.
Precisely. It could be this persistent, almost invisible internal activity that builds up change over time.
That idea of persistence over sheer speed,
Mm.
it really seems central here, redefining not stopping.
It absolutely is. And the source brings in waves next. Think about waves in the shore.
Okay.
It introduces this idea of persistence as frequency, not velocity. It's not about how fast one wave travels across the ocean.
It's about them keep coming?
Exactly. It's the amplitude, the power, and the relentless repetition. The frequency of wave after wave hitting the shore. That's what shapes the coastline over time. That persistent signal, that rhythm, that frequency.
That's a powerful image.
Mm.
And, okay, geology. That feels like the ultimate slow burn.
It really is. The source uses geology to talk about slowness as depth. Faster doesn't mean deeper impact.
Right? Building mountains isn't quick.
Not at all. It's those incredibly slow, gradual geological forces folding, eroding, shifting over millions, billions of years that create the most profound, lasting changes on the planet. It's endurance creating depth.
So taking all these diverse examples together, particles, trees, music, brains, waves, mountains, they're all pointing away from a simple fast, slow, stop-go kind of binary.
That's exactly the point. The source calls it a false binary and brings in this idea of time fracture.
And fracturing, what's that?
It suggests that growth often doesn't happen smoothly. It happens in thresholds. You get these long periods where it looks like nothing much is happening.
Like stasis.
Kind of like pressure building up or that subtle brain rewiring we talked about. And then suddenly you get these leaps forward, big changes.
Like punctuated equilibrium in evolution.
Precisely. That's the concept it evokes. The slowness wasn't empty time. It was the necessary preparation, the build-up, the hidden work for the seemingly fast leap.
Okay, wow. This really does reshape the whole thing.
Yeah.
So if we weave all these threads together, the quantum view, the trees, the music rests, neuroplasticity, waves, geology, punctuated equilibrium, what's this sort of crystallized insight? What does the source say this aphorism really means?
Well, the source concludes that the saying isn't just some simple pep talk. It's pointing towards something much bigger, what it calls a cosmic pattern.
A cosmic pattern.
And the new interpretation it offers is this. Progress is not a race forward, but a rhythmic unfolding. As long as the signal remains alive, even imperceptibly, the system evolves.
A rhythmic unfolding. I like that. It shifts everything away from just speed and distance.
It really does. It focuses on continuity, on the underlying pulse, and the source gives another, even more poetic reframe, calling it almost a psychedelic reframe.
Okay.
It says, the pulse matters more than the pace. The heartbeat of becoming does not need speed-only continuity.
The pulse matters more than the pace. Wow, that lands differently. So for you listening, what does embracing this perspective invite you to do or think about?
The source suggests a few things. It invites us to learn how to decelerate without stagnating, finding that balance.
Tricky, but important.
Very. It also encourages us to honor the slow alchemy of becoming, to really appreciate that deep, meaningful change often happens slowly, subtly, beneath the surface.
The hidden work again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe the biggest invitation is to remember that presence is a path, not just progress. Meaning that being fully present, engaged in where you are right now in this part of the process, that itself is a valid and vital form of moving forward, of evolving, regardless of how fast things look from the outside.
So pulling this all together then, the core argument from this source material is really challenging our usual, almost default, linear, speed-driven view of progress.
Yeah, it's arguing that that view is just incomplete. It proposes we should understand progress more fundamentally as this rhythmic unfolding.
Right, and all those fascinating analogies, the quantum stuff, the trees growing, the rest in music, the brain rewiring, the waves, the geology, the threshold leaps.
They all serve to illustrate that rhythmic unfolding. They show how things like continuity, frequency, depth, duration, and these nonlinear jumps
Are actually really powerful ways that change and evolution happen. Ways our obsession with just going faster makes us miss.
Absolutely. They highlight that the real value might not just be in, covering ground quickly. It might be in the persistence of the signal, the depth that builds over time, the essential nature of the pause, the rhythm of repetition, the necessary quiet buildup before transformation. It's just a much richer, more nuanced picture of how things actually become.
This has been quite a journey. We took a saying that honestly feels almost like a cliche sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And this source material just cracks it wide open,
Mm.
reveals this hidden dimension, this cosmic pattern underneath. It's not just about grinding forward endlessly.
No, it's about understanding these deeper, maybe more natural rhythms of how things actually come to be.
Yeah. As the source shows, the value isn't only in speed or that nonstop linear push. It's in the continuity, the presence, the natural unfolding.
Mm.
It definitely pushes back against that ingrained idea that faster is always better or that
Yeah.
pausing is always some kind of failure.
It really shifts the focus, doesn't it?
Yeah.
From sheer velocity to underlying vitality.
Vitality. I like that. So here's a final thought from the source material for you to maybe ponder. How does thinking about your own progress, not as a race you have to win, but as a rhythmic unfolding, how does that change things?
Or prioritizing presence as a path, being fully where you are rather than just focusing on the next milestone.
Yeah, what might it really mean in your own life, your own work, your own growth, to consciously honor the slow alchemy of becoming? Something to think about.